Good evening, everyone. Welcome to episode 16 of Restitching the Tapestry. And Ari, I think we should do a toast. We should do a toast to the person who disliked our video
Already.
because it's pretty hilarious for a person to dislike a video about science, basically suggesting that they don't like science. So, clink,
Clink.
clink, clink to you, person. Hopefully, you find some enlightenment in life at some point, though I don't have high hopes for that.
Just the
Anyway,
mere just the mere idea. Like science? Nope. Not even hearing what we're talking about tonight, just like the mere idea of science. Like, nope.
right. It's fine though, because the truth is, whenever a person dislikes a video, I'm always like, thanks for the view. I super appreciate it.
I'm just I'm just boggled, like, okay, I guess science sucks.
Oh, so we have some people tuning in. David is back. Hello, David. It's good to see you. Arby's here. David says, I only dislike science when the classes are trying to kill me. Oh my God. Right? So we're going to wait like a minute or so and let people tune in. I hope you're all doing well. It's been a very hectic week. Like every week at this point is hectic. It probably will feel that way all the way up until the election, honestly. But um, so Ari, tell us how you've been doing.
I have been doing just okay. Like, it's been kind of like, I don't know, we're getting into fall and it's been kind of fall mood. Like, you're kind of getting into that like slump, you know? It's getting into the slump weather. And like I'm starting to like kind of crawl into my hole and get into that hole mode. Is everybody kind of getting into that where like starting to hibernate burrito mode into the blankets,
Oh
you
gosh,
know,
yep.
get the wine out, get the hot chocolate out.
Oh, the other day I had hot apple cider and it was
Primo.
perfect. It
I
was phenom.
I saw the video and I was like, I was very jealous.
um, David says, I didn't know y'all had moved to Friday. What a nice surprise. Yeah, like we wanted to move to Friday because we knew it would, well, I mean, it's easier for our schedule, but we figured that we might get a few people coming in on Friday. So, I mean, of course, if people can't tune in for these, we know that at the end of the day, you can just go back and rewatch them too and leave comments because we're always keeping track of comments. So, all right. So, let's get the show on the road, shall we? So, this is episode 16, The Significance of Science. Again, mind boggling to think that we are on episode 16, but we're super happy that we are going strong with this. So, before we move forward, I would like to make sure that we read our show's mission statement. So, many witness different atrocities, large or small, that fray the social fabric around us, and much of the time, many may feel powerless and not know how to address such things. And this fray has gotten worse with the rise of social media because people are able to share in trauma as it goes viral and experience this collective outrage and emotional onslaught in a way on a mass scale. And what that begs us the question of what can we do to mend the communities who have seen considerable tragedy, most of which privileged groups have caused and, well, of course, don't admit their involvement. So the whole purpose of this show is to work on restitching the tapestry through conversation, creativity, and action. And honestly, all of it's done through educating. And our goal here is, I mean, not only are we educating ourselves with a lot of these topics, but our goal is to help perpetuate that information to all of you as well. So, but yeah, anyway, welcome. Thank you for joining us. So, the significance of science. So, Ari, would you like to start off with this one? What inspired us to do this episode?
I think really okay, like let's talk about like Trump for a second and
Ooh,
Trump and science. Okay.
clink.
Yeah, I'll drink to that. So
uh,
Trump with his uh knowledge decided to with corona, not even just corona, just emerging diseases research cut funding. He cut funding to the research, and then all of a sudden we were getting the pandemic. And it was seemed like there was kind of like a causality that like he cut the research and then all of a sudden we were getting this pandemic. And it seemed like it was sort of like this might have been prevented because uh you know It it could have been lessened because, the research done, on the coronavirus, would have been, lessened the impact. They might have had more of an idea of, like, how it was going to, like, strike and, like, more of, like, how like, the research done on it and, like, might have known potentially. There was a great New York Times video done about like what this organization did about like before a pandemic, just how much this research team just does before a pandemic, like going into places and just how much impact they have on the world and just how much they do to prevent these worldwide disasters and he cut funding to them and you know um, it was kind of like a plea to restore funding to them to prevent from the next disaster from happening, a next pandemic, uh, to keep this from happening again in the next couple years or the next 5 years, so we don't have like another cycle of like 5 years. We have another pandemic, and then we're just going through another cycle of like constantly being in a pandemic mood. So, but is it a cause and effect specifically? Like, that's not as simple, but, uh,
I
the
think
science
there's a variable at least.
it's definitely something that, like, you can definitely point to as saying, "Well, this definitely might have been a factor in something that had happened," and that maybe we could have done something to lessen the impact by having this tool in our toolbox at the time, and that like we could have done something to prevent this. So like when we say that Trump ignores science, uh this is something we point to and go, well, yes.
I mean, it's like it's very clear. Not only that, it's documented both in live form and in written form.
Mhm.
And
But
it amazes me that it's still denied that that is the fact because it's been so out there.
yeah. But that was, like, the original idea that I had was that, like, he the idea behind the show is, like, that the coronavirus could have been, um, th there was more that could have been done to prevent the coronavirus had there been funding given to organizations, with these emerging diseases.
Right. You know, David brought up an interesting point saying that it could have been an opportunity to bring the country together to rally and organize health agencies in a methodical way and rally the people to follow the best practices. Agreed. And we're going to talk about this a little bit more in this episode as well, but obviously those in very high social power in our country, our president being, one of them, like when you look toward leaders and leaders are literally telling or saying things like don't believe the science or like putting out like misinformation, so on and so forth, people are then going to be in a way numbed to the severity of things. They're just going to dismiss it until they're directly affected by something, and it's at their expense.
And when they start believing the Facebook posts about the myths and stuff, you start to think, well, you know, science does have a place in this world, and there's a significance to that science, and that you need to pay attention to the science of these things because they impact your day-to-day life and you may not even realize it.
Oh, agreed. And I'm glad that you mentioned social media because as much as I love social media, I think it's really aggravated this perpetuation of misinformation and and people really cling onto those things. Like, I mean,
Mhm,
we see people clinging onto these conspiracy theories of masks killing people or like these conspiracy theories related to herd immunity and the truth is, like, I personally think the reason why people cling to those things so much is because they are being told by those with a lot of social influence that the media is unreliable, that the science is unreliable, don't believe anything that you come across. And the truth is, if we are getting information from people who have literally spent their lives studying for a particular discipline or subject area, why should we not believe them? Right now, we're being conditioned to completely disregard careers and uh, education and a whole variety of different things. And obviously, we're going to talk a little bit more about that later on in the episode, but it's just it's been kind of like just this echo chamber of don't believe, don't believe, don't believe, you know? And uh, to me, it's very cynical. Like, if you
mhm,
want to believe in your fellow man, if you want to believe in what it means to be American, it's also investing belief in people who have dedicated their lives in following the American dream and getting a career in these fields that are reputable fields, you know?
mhm.
End rant. I need another drink.
No, I think that's important, yeah. Um, but yeah, that was like one very important aspect is that uh, I think that the coronavirus definitely was one starter point is that it's something that we're seeing
Right.
in real time. So, uh, but not just that, like we're seeing other things that are affecting us,
Oh,
such
yeah, of
as
course.
so like I wanted to talk about space.
Let's talk about space. I love talking about space.
So, like, why do we study stars and black holes and Mars and space? Because, like, people go, well, what's the importance of it? And, like, why do we do it? And, like, why is it important in our day to day life? Because it doesn't really, like, it doesn't really, like, affect us day to day, but it kind of does.
Oh,
Because,
yeah.
like, uh, people come up with innovations when they are coming up with like Mars rovers and like when they're making things to like send off to the moon or they're sending things off to like make these probes and like when they're making things for space they're making things all the time to like solve problems, and when they solve these problems they come up with innovations that affect our lives and like they change, like they make things that like will become new technologies for us in our day-to-day lives. And so they create these innovations that get passed down to us in our society. So they create innovations. Um, and it's subtle things like silly putty or I could list off
Well, like, not to interrupt you, I just want to add on to your innovation tidbit. Like, there are jobs when it comes to innovation. Like, innovation can create jobs too. Like, I know a lot of this, like, a lot of people dismiss it as being like, "Oh, well, this is pointless science stuff," but I mean, studying this stuff helps the economy,
Mhm.
when you think about it. Anyway, I just wanted to throw that in there.
Yeah. No, it does, yeah. So, one, it creates innovations that get brought down to the everyman. Uh, s and it's sometimes slow, but it does get brought down to everyone in their everyday life, and it affects us sometimes dramatically, but sometimes just subtly. Um, but it does change us in our everyday life.
Oh, yeah.
Um, it creates a society that's moving towards something. Uh, like, okay, so I unfortunately was caught listening to a Trump speech today. Don't ask me why.
Was it the
My
town
mom,
hall?
no, it was he had a rally in Florida, and I was,
Oh.
but one thing he mentioned was he wanted to send a woman to the moon, and he wanted to send have people be the first people on Mars. And I was like, even though he's a bad dude, like he's
That's a pretty
still
cool goal.
he still understands the idea of moving towards something, moving towards a goal of like that moving towards us something having us move towards a goal in our society where we're innovating and maybe I hate to say colonizing, but like where we're moving towards a goal of our society doing something and having some idea in our mind of what we're going to do in the future and have us maybe living on Mars where there's a colony of people living there. I mean, we talk about it in science fiction, but like it's only science fiction until we do it. And it's only science fiction that there are people living on the moon until we do it. It's only it's only it's only fiction until we actually work towards that goal. So, you know,
Well, and another thing is, like, creating goals like that brings people together. Like,
mhm,
it is consolidating. Like, if we look back at the mid and late '60s, like, the whole world was watching as we literally put the first man on the moon, and it was a very significant moment where, like, humanity in some way worked together. I mean, yeah, it was, like, our country, of course, but it was, like, also people with diverse backgrounds, people with diverse stances on things, all working together for this one momentous occasion of being able to set foot on the moon for the first time, you know?
mhm,
And I do appreciate the president making like, thinking about goals like that because, I mean, one of my biggest frustrations with him is the fact that, like, his rhetoric is very divisive and it divides people, and I mean, I'm not saying that focusing on landing on Mars is going to fix all of that. I don't think it will. Like there's going to be other things that.
the problem with landing on Mars is, like, it is a costly adventure, and
Oh
it is a
yeah, for sure.
costly endeavor
And dangerous too.
and dangerous, and
Mhm.
it's far away, and but and we have more pressing matters to do before we get to setting a person on the moon, and there are definitely a lot of obstacles before we set a person on Mars, and just is it really efficient to send a person to Mars? Can't we send probes before we send people to Mars? Just a lot of things.
Right, yeah. I mean, that's a good point though. Like I think it's good to have these long-term goals, but um then again, like one must be realistic too. It's a process. You don't just snap a finger and suddenly um you're on Mars. I mean, we could have a lot of conversation about like, I mean, the Space Force as well, which is a new branch of the military that Has the president created that yet, or is he in the process of creating
It's
that?
already created, and
I was gonna
it has the Star Trek logo as its
Oh, the Star Trek Delta, yeah. Granted, I know that symbol is used a lot in, like, aerospace, like, types of, ventures, so but it is just super ironic that, like, the mission statement that I read of the Space Force is a very similar mission statement to, um, the United Federation of Planets from Star Trek, so I'm just like, "Okay." I mean, I think, like, having that wonderful future would be great, but are you the person to create it, you know? Like, that's the
copy,
question.
paste.
Oh my goodness.
It was great. Um, another reason why we study space and stars and black holes and all of that stuff is right, David, live long and prosper,
Mhm.
definitely. Uh, but another reason why we study space is who knows what's out there and potentially could be dangerous to us. We have no idea what's out there sometimes, like what's coming towards us, like asteroids, like meteors, like they're coming towards us at all these times, and like we have no idea like what's coming. So like studying space, we're threat assessing at all times. Like we had a meteor come towards planet Earth, and it was, like, the size of I think it was the size of, like, um it wasn't the size of a basketball, it was, like, the size of it was, like, the size of, like, a couch or something.
It was pretty big.
Yeah, and it was, like and it came through our atmosphere, and it was, like, in July or so, and
Sorry, like David said something. I mean, studying space is also out of this world. It's a really stellar topic. Ah, ah. Can you see the
Oh.
stars in my eyes as you made those puns?
Dad jokes. Oh.
Okay, whew.
Also, signs of life in the universe are too exciting to give up on. I bring this up because of the phosphine on Venus in the sulfuric clouds of Venus. I
Oh,
mentioned
yeah, I
this
remember hearing about that.
because, but and I'll mention this later, but with the scientific method, um, but really, like we're always looking for life. Like we looked for it on Io too, where we found water, and we were looking for water on Mars. We're always constantly looking for life. We're always constantly looking for some kind of life in the universe besides our own. It's
Mhm,
too exciting to like we're always looking for something that we can connect to. We're always looking to connect to something besides our own because we want to connect to something beyond ourselves because it's too exciting, it's too riveting. We want to cultivate that relationship.
well, and I mean, this is one reason why I really do appreciate franchises like Star Trek. It's because humanity really does have a passion for exploration. Had we not had that passion, do you think we would have branched out and explored the rest of the world? Probably not, right? We would have just stayed in the valley in which we were created and not, perpetuated our civilization. So, like it's just really empowering to think that we still have that drive. And I think that it's important to use that drive and to keep wanting to grow, you know? And I think space is that next step.
Yep, as part of that next frontier. The final
The final
frontier.
frontier. We're nerding out tonight, and I love it.
Um, Space has some of the biggest unknowns in the universe. Black holes are some of the biggest unknowns. We can't conceive of what's inside of them. We only have a basic understanding of how they work, what they do, what their purpose is, what it all means. We don't know. It's one of the giant unknowns. It's beautiful, and they're all freaking over the place. So they're huge, they're tiny. We barely have some in the middle. We have no idea. They're just these giant black holes all over the place, and they're just this big unknown.
Well, yeah, like, and the thing
And
is,
they're some of the biggest unknowns in the universe.
well, and they've also, like, a lot of people theorize, and it's been discussed, like, through studying black holes, are we examining the creation and destruction cycles of the universe, so on and so forth. I mean, it may not be something that we see in our lifetime, but it's still something to think about. Like how long will our planet be around? Will anything larger than us ever affect us? Like, I think it's very sensible to think about such things. David, we're really going to town with these Star Trek puns. Non-scientific people should be assimilated. Yes, I agree. You should turn puns into an enterprising industry. That was really bad. Anyway, um, so let's see. Do we want to talk a little bit more about evolution by any chance? Like, let's talk a
We
little bit
do
about
want to talk about
evolution. I don't think I'm skip. Did I
um
skip any spot? I apologize if I did.
well, like, because I took this evolution class, and like they talked about like whether or not creationism should be taught in schools, and like I don't really think that creationism should be taught in schools, honestly, because it doesn't follow the scientific method.
Agreed.
And like, does everybody know what the scientific method is? Should we talk about the scientific method?
Yeah, let's talk about the scientific method.
So the scientific method talks about like formulating a hypothesis, and like you test the hypothesis, and then you see whether or not the hypothesis matches, or the product matches this hypothesis, and then you kind of go through the cycle of like retesting, and then discovering like through the testing process a theory of whether or not you can formulate an opinion about something based on your outcome of these this testing.
Hmm.
So, um, but it all starts with a hypothesis.
Oh
So,
yeah, yeah.
so the hypothesis in creationism is God created everything. But there's no way to test whether or not God created everything. And so therefore it fails in the scientific method. There's no way to test whether or not God created everything. There's just it kind of just gets it falls flat in the scientific method.
Well, and the thing is, the scientific method, um, like, you have to be able to observe something in order to question it and hypothesize it. And the truth is, like, I mean, one could make the judgment that in observing nature, we're observing God, but we haven't been able to literally observe God in any way. So, thus, that's why it's not deemed as being scientific, because that tangible evidence is not present.
That's why it just is religion, and it's not science. And
Hmm.
you in my evolution class they mentioned that there is this sort of like tension between religion and science, but like this tension is all illusionary, and that you can actually like marry the two, and actually like kind of form a bond between religion and science, because you can say, well, you know, um, we don't know about the beginning of the universe. We don't know about the beginning of like the beginning of how things started, and how things began, and like we only know how things are at a certain point, and when we get to that point everything falls flat. So we know that things evolved, and we do know
Right.
that, but we don't know before the evolution about those things. So maybe God started the process. Maybe God is like an idea of like this thing of like maybe
Some sort
God
of
just,
like catalyst.
yeah, and that
Mhm.
maybe God is an idea of, maybe God s- is an idea of, he set up the whole play, the sandbox in which we play in, and that we are just playing in this box.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, and the thing is, it's not to say that creationism shouldn't be taught per se. It just should be taught within a religious context, within a religious space, much like the scientific method should be taught within, a space that acknowledges science as being valid.
I don't know if creationism should be taught, because I think that it is sets a dangerous precedent, because it has this, it ignores certain things,
Yeah,
and
that is true.
but if it's somebody's belief, it's their belief. I think that it ignores science, but like I said, you can marry science and religion and have it work together and formulate a new belief. Uh, but this is just my opinion. Take it or leave it. If you want to believe in creationism, that is of your own opinion, and I understand that.
Mhm.
Um, so I'm not telling people what their beliefs are is wrong, if they want to believe in this. So I'm just saying that if you want to believe in God and evolution, there is a way in which to do that.
Yeah. It's interesting. David said creationism, wow, I cannot speak. Creationism could only be taught if you taught it from every world religion's perspective. That's the only, well, I mean, yeah, that's a very interesting point that you made because each religion has its own variation of its idea on creation. That's a good point.
Yeah.
I like that. But
But
I
should it be taught in science class?
oh
I don't think
no.
so.
Oh, I don't think so either. Um, because again, like, the very fabric of it works against faith is about believing in something that you can't see, regardless if you're aware or not of its existence, whereas science is about accepting what is tangible, what is provable, what's observable, you know? Oh, we're getting so deep. I love it.
But like, I'm a person who believes, because I'm a pagan, I believe in like biocycles. So
Mhm.
like I believe in like the idea that like everything has a natural cycle of things, and like everything has like its own cycle, like the days and the months and the years, and like evolution is a cycle, and like everything has its own little cycle, and that we have our lifespans, and so that's how I evolution fits into my ideas about science. So and I can still remain religious, but that's my
Right.
personal belief.
I will echo that. I have some similar beliefs as well. I believe that everything has an energy about it, and that energy eventually expends itself, and eventually it's reintegrated back into the whole until it, you know, creates something new, until it forms into something new. Super abstract sounding, but
We're
I
getting
usually
off on a tangent about religion, but
I know. Well, I mean, I think it's important to discuss religion though, because our goal is to contrast it.
Mhm,
Um, Especially for there's a lot of people out there who think that religion should take a more dominant role in education than science should. And I mean, we can also say that that has a lot to do with like the current rhetorical landscape that we're experiencing, because
mhm.
everybody, well, not everybody, a lot of people who oppose science view that science is in some way attacking religion, that it's disempowering religion. And truthfully, what we need to do is just, I don't know, divorce the two in a way, because they are two different subject areas meant for two completely different conversations in two separate spaces altogether, you know?
Yeah, and I don't think that's necessary. I think that honestly, and it's been a problem, is that like I don't think that you should necessarily have to divorce religion from science. I think that like when you talk about science, you can talk about religion. I think there's a time and a place for it, but I think that you can bring up religion in science. I think that it's possible, but not always necessary. I think that like there's a context for it, and that there's a place for it, and I think that like you can approach science with an understanding of your religious context, and that you because like okay, the the guy who studied pea plants, he was a religious man, and he studied genetics from the idea of doing this from his godly perspective, that he was a religious man, and he was still doing this with the idea that he was benefiting God. And like you can still do this, you can still study science with the idea that you're still religious, and like a lot of scientific endeavors can still be done with the idea that you're still like, you know what I mean, like that you're not doing a disservice to God, and like or the Christian God, or you know what I mean, or that you're and like I feel like you can study space, and that you can study viruses, and that you can study all of these things with the benefit that you're still doing it with your God in mind. And like that there's no there's no
Yeah, I think. I mean, I mean, I think what you're saying makes complete sense. And I actually have a supplemental question. Do you think? Let me think of how to word it. Do you think that maybe the conditioning that we've had for decades, the conditioning to divorce religion and science, has contributed to the, in a way, warring between religion and science?
um I think so. I think that there has been like this idea that like science is like logical, and that it's like scientific, and that it's always one way, and that you always have to think of it as like it's this way, and that it's hard facts, and that it's always this way, and it's not the case. Science is changeable, and it gets changeable because they add new information to it all the time. They're always doing testing, they're always coming up with new information all the time. And yes, there are some things that are more solid science because they've done lots and lots of testing, so it's more of like an accepted fact because it's been several centuries of testing and retesting and testing again. So it's more of an accepted fact.
Mhm.
So it's something that's become more of an idea, a solid idea. But these are science is just as tenuous as religion is. And
Mm.
I don't think that people understand that you can marry religion and science together because they're just as tenuous and just as fallible as the other is.
Right, yeah. Yeah, that's a good point.
So I don't see how people can't accept the two together because they don't they aren't they aren't warring each other. They're one and the same. The
Oh, I think a lot of it is just it's a learned experience, you know? Like, I mean, for example, like, I have my biases toward religion because of a lot of really negative experiences that I had associated with religion, so, I mean, as I've grown, I've been able to talk about religion much more openly, um, and objectively, but I know that a lot of people, I mean, probably on both sides, have had, like, a very difficult conditioning to go through. I mean, we have to think about, like, let's think about kids who grow up in religious families who go to church or go to school and learn about science and then come home to a different message and come home to a family saying that, that's not accurate, so like on both sides of the conversation there are groups of people trying to, I don't know, like, diffuse what's being learned, by the children. Maybe one way to fix it is just by teaching kids that they should create, like, derive their own stances on these things instead of having it be imposed, perhaps.
I'm not sure, how to
I mean,
answer that,
it
honestly.
I don't know that we can
Maybe
answer it.
I maybe, maybe, yeah, that seems like a good idea is having them form their own ideas about it. That seems like a good idea.
Well,
Always
it's
having because you definitely want to teach them and don't want to like but you definitely want to guide them in a certain direction, but you don't want to like over guide them. But at the same time, you want to like lead them in a certain direction because
right.
you want to. So like I'm worrying about this because it's like you want to guide them, but you don't want to impose them, but you don't want to not impose them. So you
Well,
want to
that
to a
yeah.
certain point. So like
Y y
I'm
it's like
worried
this
about this.
very it's a very delicate balance, I would say, because if you don't guide them at all, they could go off in a completely different direction that disregards the connection both between religion and science. Like, it could turn into something that's completely unexpected, and it could potentially be
It's
a
just
negative
chaotic.
thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
it could just be chaos. So, I mean, and that's deeply philosophical. We could have, like, 10 shows about that probably, but, like, I really think that what needs to be taught is objectivity, and like, being able to assess things, because, like, I do like, as abstract and as subjective as religion is, I do believe that religion can be assessed on a personal level, and I think it's really interesting how you've been talking about the fact that, like, both religion and science don't need to be divorced because there can be ways of interweaving them together where for the individual, like, one can respect one, but still have an objective understanding of the other.
Hmm. It's hard to relate sometimes because for Jews, our existences always seem to be balancing ourselves on a roof. So when people have an issue with faith and science, it's hard for us sometimes. Hmm.
Interesting. My allergies are driving me crazy today.
That's interesting, David.
Yeah, that is interesting. Like, I guess, David, I mean, if you feel comfortable sharing this, how have you managed to find common ground between the two? If possible, of course. And while you're typing that, we will continue um, going on our notes here. So, do we want to talk about some historical context a little bit,
Oh,
like
yeah.
surrounding science?
So I wanted to talk about how we used to believe that the Earth was the center of the universe and how everything revolved around it. And like, just science proved that wrong. We had
Wasn't
we
it
have
Galileo
Galileo.
that proved that? Yeah.
Yes, Galileo proved that wrong. And like he got in so much trouble for proving that wrong. And like but it got held up. It held up because the science held it up. And we finally believed it. Um and but we're backtracking now. We have these flat earthers who believe that the earth is flat. And we're kind of going backwards in science.
Yeah, I think so too. Oh, hi, Igni. It's good to see you. I'm sorry if you're having a rough day today. I hope it gets better.
Oh, sorry, Igni.
Oh, whenever I'm in the middle of having a panic attack, I have my therapist taught me like breathing exercises. Like I breathe in for like 4 or 5 counts, and then I breathe out for 5 to 6 counts. And usually that helps me. I don't know if you want to try that or not. Hopefully it helps if you do. Um, so we'll pick up on that historical tidbit in a second because David also says that for myself in Judaism, you're encouraged to wrestle with text and what it means. It's said Torah has 70 faces, so each of us should interpret it. And for me, the scientific method holds water. From a Jewish perspective, your job is to see God within the natural cosmos. So to understand it is better. Interesting. So it's kind of like placing ourselves, like understanding how we ourselves are placed within the grand scheme of things and how that's significant. That's my understanding of what you said. And Igni, just to fill you in on what you've missed, we've been talking about we've been talking about how science has been devalued as of late, and we've been kind of going through like historical context a little bit. We've been talking about like the divisions between religion and science and why there really shouldn't be divisions at all in the first place. And I mean, we've had some conversation about education as well and how that plays into it. We're by all means not done with our conversation. We still got some way to go, but from the sounds of it, okay, so David, my understanding of what you were saying was accurate. Okay. I can see how that would be difficult though, because it's like giving power to an individual for that like breadth of interpretation, like that can be a very intimidating thing. So I can imagine how intimidating that would be for you.
Wow.
So, do we want to go back and touch on that historical tidbit that you were talking about, Ari?
I don't know where my mind is blown right now.
Where were I know like I had to like I read what David wrote and I was just like, whoa, that is kind of interesting. David, you made us both spellbound.
Sure. So I was talking about flat earthers, how Um, Galileo had uh, proved that the Earth was the center of the universe, and the science held up. But right now we're backtracking because we have these flat earthers believing we have flat earthers believing that the Earth is flat, even though the science has proved them wrong. They're ignoring the science, and so I don't understand, like, the science is holding up, and they're not believing the science, they're ignoring the science, they're coming up with their own, like, sensory, like, weird science themselves, like, these weird, like, illusory, like, experiments that don't make sense to come up with, like, reasons why they believe these weird science ideas about the Earth is flat.
Mhm. You know,
No, the
that's
flat earthers are not just trolls, they are actual people who believe the Earth is flat.
well, and I think it all comes down to the villainization of science, because like observing the rhetorical flow of the past few years, because it's gotten really bad the past few years. Like there's been like this association of science being some sort of weapon utilized by the media, for example, or like I've read people make comments about how science is this radical extension of the left trying to destroy religious ideologies and traditions. And I mean, I personally don't think that is the case at all whatsoever. Like I think that's just people falling into that conditioning of, well, religion and science being different, therefore they must be in conflict. You know, like people willingly perpetuate that conflict. Even I sometimes do too. And I mean, it's something I should probably not do. That's an experience that takes a lot of, it's very challenging unlearning that conditioning, you know?
But it's unnerving to see how many high school students actually believe it's like something like 60% of high school students believe the Earth is flat.
Really? Oh my
It's
goodness.
it's something I think there was, an I saw it.
Go find that statistics, and I'm gonna start us on our first discussion question. We already talked about creationism being offered as an alternative and option for students in public schools, and we agreed that that shouldn't be the case. The next question that we were thinking about is, has the recent emboldening of the religious right had an impact on people believing science? And again, that kind of goes back to what we were just talking about. I would say yes, because that emboldening has kind of expanded the chasm between people believing in science and people believing in religion. There's been like that divorce of the two has been just widening and widening and widening, you know. And and I think when people, like we were talking about at the beginning of this episode, if people look toward those in power and see those in power flat out saying, um, the science
Um,
isn't accurate, or like I have other scientists who think different, you know, like it kind of perpetuates that like inability or unwant to believe the science. And what were you about to say, Ari?
I thought it was one third, but I was wrong, as sciencealert.com has told me it's only 4%.
I mean, 4% or six, like I still think 4% is an alarmingly large number. Like that means like 4 out of 100 people believe that the earth is flat.
It's 4%.
That's
Thank you.
still
Thank you, Science Alert. I I had a freak
see.
out when I heard the statistic on this video I watched, and I was like, "What? It's only 4%."
Well, and the truth is, like, I mean, it could be something that we could probably look more into as well, because I can guarantee there might be other sources that may have different percentages. We would just have to see like what their sourced material themselves, or like I'm very curious about this video that said, oh, 60%. Like I would want to see their basis for that.
It was a polling group of like 9,000 people.
Oh, interesting. Must be a very unique set of 9,000 people. Like, I don't know. Oh, David also says it might also differ by region and states. That's true. Igni says anything above 0% is alarmingly large. uh, oh, I needed that laugh. So here is another interesting question, because we have a few more minutes left. Should scientists fear those in political power, considering medical and science officials have had to censor their remarks in light of the president's opinions or wishes? What do you think about that one, Ari?
That makes me nervous because censoring yourself just um, because of the president's remarks, means that the truth or the science is not coming out, and that means that uh, advancements in medical research or advancements in what needs to be done are not coming forward, and
Mm-hmm.
that's dangerous because we're not getting to the bottom of things. We're not getting what needs to be done, and that means that we're not making that march of progress, and we're being held back in some way, and he's just you know, guns blazing, we got to get the vaccine out as quick as possible, and sometimes that isn't always possible. You know, we have to like take our time and, to
Yeah.
make sure that things are done right, and he's
Well,
doing it at a dangerous rate, and
well,
he
and we saw that censoring live on television when, um, like, I mean, he unfortunately contracted COVID-19 and was sent to like one of the most like high tech recognized hospitals in our country, and in the statements made by his medical officials, like I mean, it was very clear that they weren't answering questions that the press was asking. And I know they were justifying that, be like, well, the president has his privacy, and they were justifying it as the president didn't want to appear weak, and I get that, but there is also a significant transparency involved when it comes to science as well. Like, lack of transparency can be very dangerous.
but there's also like a patient doctor confidentiality, and
Oh,
like,
yeah.
so, like, I understand, like, if a patient doesn't want their information to be, like, released, like, to not release that information, like,
But
so
then
I
again, we also have to think about the person holding the highest power office as well. You know, it's a very difficult
I
in
don't
between.
care who it is, I
Hmm.
don't care who it is, they have a right to their privacy, and, like, it sucks that it's the president, but, like, he has a right to his privacy, and, like, it sucks, it sucks, it sucks. But he has a right to his privacy just like any other citizen. So, yeah, I mean, it sucks that that we don't get information about this, but like,
Hmm.
it's important because he is just as like a citizen. He deserves to have his privacy just like everybody else.
I agree. Like, I do agree. But if we look at the rhetoric that was coming out of that situation, we saw that literally they were being told to convey one message opposite of everything else when they could have simply said no comment, or we can't disclose that information instead of saying something completely different that is misleading. Does that make sense?
I mean, that's their right. It's unfortunate, but they spun it the
Yeah.
way that they did. They
I just don't think it's ethically appropriate
It's
to,
not ethical at all.
and I understand that there is like I mean, obviously privacy should be respected, and I agree with that. But I do think that there should be some level of understanding that like they should have just said, no, we're not like at liberty to discuss that instead of saying something completely, you know.
The doctors did say we're not at liberty to discuss it.
Did they say that? I don't remember them saying that.
I think so, yeah.
Well, if they did say that, then they're definitely entitled to that. I think that's a good thing then.
It was Trump that was the only one who was saying these things. The doctors were like, "I can't discuss it. I can't discuss it."
Oh, let's see. So
They were
we're
only
getting
releasing any information that he was allowing them to release. They weren't releasing any information that he was not allowing them to release.
mhm. I mean that is fair. Like again, like he has the right, like everybody else, to determine what is revealed and what isn't revealed, of course.
It's unfortunate, but that's
So then I
I
guess,
was a patient. I was a patient in the hospital, when I had my bipolar episode. I had to give certain people rights to my information, and you have to, like, sign paperwork. You have to do certain things to make sure that certain people are allowed to know information about you, and if you don't want anyone knowing, they won't know,
mhm.
and it's just the way it is.
No, I think it's good that that is the way it is, though, because like that information can be used negatively, you know. And I guess I was just circulating back to like, I mean, if the president after the fact was be disclosing misleading information, like again, it just comes back to the what I think is the moral responsibility of that seat.
I mean, it sucks that he lies, but, like,
Mhm.
that makes him the liar, that doesn't make the doctors the liar. You can't
Well,
blame the
no,
doctors for what he's
and
doing.
right, and I mean, I don't think they were. I mean, I don't think they were lying necessarily, you know. So I
But you
just think
can't tell the
that,
doctors to reveal information that they wouldn't reveal about
oh
anyone else.
no, it wasn't my goal to convey that. I hope I wasn't suggesting
Mhm.
that,
Yeah.
um, but I don't know. I just have a memory of misinformation being given. I mean, I guess for security purposes, maybe that was expected. So, last but not least, the final question for the night. Could the lack of seriousness towards science currently be connected to the devaluing of education as an institution and career area? What do you think about that one?
I think it could be, connected to, I think it could. I think that there is a push towards, uh science though recently, especially with STEM, that there because my nephews have definitely been pushed into STEM, which is like science and technology and other sciences more than when I was in elementary and middle school and high school, especially
Mhm,
uh, that there is a push towards the sciences more than before, especially for uh, women and girls.
mhm. Oh, yeah,
um,
for sure.
that they want them more in STEM. So I'm really hopeful about the future, that it's not being devalued as we may think, that there is like a push for it. And I'm actually really hopeful about education in science, um, that it's actually like that good things are happening in science. I'm actually like more worried about like the arts,
Yeah, that is a good point.
but like um STEM is doing well.
Yeah, I I completely agree with that. Um, I just think that a lot of it, maybe the pandemic has exasperated the, like, I don't wanna necessarily say the devaluing of science, but, like, the
I think
disbelief
STEM is
of.
I should clarify, STEM is doing well in most areas. I think there are some areas of the country where they don't appreciate STEM as well, but like most areas of the country, I think they do appreciate science. I think that like you get some places in the country, they just don't have the funding to push for science, but I think that science is like important, and I think that science and technology are really pushing in our society, and I think that like most people will recognize that science and technology are really pushing in our future, and that like the future of our society is in science and technology.
Oh, yeah. Like, there's still, I mean, I think on an economic front especially, there's still a very distinct interest in and passion for our country to be the innovation leader in a way. I mean, we see that being said by, like, I mean, if we think about it from a political standpoint, we see this being said from people on both sides of the political spectrum. So I think regardless, hopefully, we will still keep growing on a scientific basis and keep acknowledging science as being significant, um, as we do now. So.
That's why I'm so worried about the arts, is because like it seems like young people are having a hard time thinking creatively and like
Mhm.
thinking problem solving, like where they're thinking creatively around issues, because like
Right.
it seems like they just it's like they're very like, this is the answer and there's only one answer and like it's the only answer there is, and like they don't think about like possible answers. It could be like the nebulous answers, like where it could be like 10 or 12 different things. They don't think about those kind of answers. And like
Mhm.
I feel like those kind of answers kind of scare kids because like they don't, it's like too much.
Well, like, because it's like you in a way, you have to visualize everything in your mind, and if you're not taught how to pan out and see everything in its working parts, like, you can't really hone in and fix individual aspects, if that makes sense.
Well, or just like think of like a few answers. Just like think of like more than, or just like think of like what it could be, or just like the possibilities.
Right,
It's just like
yeah,
it's too scary to like think of more than one answer.
right. Well, that, and I think there's also this pressure of, like, if it's an alternative answer, like, am I going to be
Punished.
shamed or punished for, coming up with something different? So.
Because like they hear an answer and they're like, well, my answer is not that answer. Is it the wrong answer?
Right. Yeah. David brought up an interesting point and said that I think newer generations being raised with so much technology and always having to be entertained kills creativity.
So like I'm kind of worried about, because my nephews are like that too. They're always like,
Mhm. Well, the thing is, like, while there's great access to information, and I think that's a good thing, but it was, in many ways, the journey in reaching the conclusion or reaching that information that made it so significant? Whereas now, if we can just click a button and have the information right in front of us, like, we can't visualize how point A goes to point B, goes to point C.
well, or they could go from point A to point C and just totally bypass point B and like not even think about point B and like
or get to point X, like who knows?
Right, like so it's just like just the idea of like, I don't know. Yeah, just it's just like the idea of like bypassing a route and just like taking a whole different route, just like they just can't even handle it.
Right, yeah.
Anyway,
Well, like I still think that there is a bright future when it comes to science.
I
And
think so, yeah.
and it just seems like right now we just seem to be in this rut where, because people really believe in what they hear people saying, like people in power, like they fall prey to that. So hopefully, if the rhetorical flow can change, we won't be disempower or those people won't be disempowering these different areas. So, Ari, my friend, do you have any parting words for our watchers this evening?
Study the stars because they're important.
Yes. Enjoy the planets, enjoy the constellations, enjoy all of them. So if you have not yet, go subscribe to Ari's channel, Strange Nothings. Subscribe to mine if you haven't yet. Click like on our video and feel free to share it. If you are watching it through later, please don't hesitate to um, come back and have a conversation, and leave a comment, because we do come back and read the comments. So anyway, I love you all. You have a wonderful rest of your evening, and bye.
Bye.